I'm Jennifer Marie Keller. Welcome to my Diary of a Painter. This video is going to be a review and summary of Teresa Oaxaca's live painting demonstration webinar hosted by The Savvy Painter. This isn't a paid promotion or anything. Teresa Oaxaca is one of my favorite painters. I really like her paintings and drawings. And so when I heard she was doing a live painting demonstration webinar, I immediately signed up for it. And the price to watch it is just $45. And I think it was worth the $45 that I spent on it. So I thought I would do a review and summary of it in case anyone else is also interested in purchasing it. So this webinar is hosted by Teresa, who does the Savvy Painter podcast, which on a side note is a great podcast where you get to hear about painters talking about painting. So if you haven't heard the Savvy Painter yet, I definitely check it out because it's pretty good. Okay, so now for the summary of the demonstration. So when I originally signed up for it, I watched it live, so people that were watching it live could ask questions that Teresa could answer directly. So if you do purchase it now, it's a recorded version of all of that. So you can't ask questions anymore. And the webinar is about 1.5 hours long. It's slightly longer than that. Okay, so it starts off with an intro of Teresa and Teresa Oaxaca. And this is during the pandemic, so they're not together. So you have two separate windows, one window with Teresa, one window with Teresa. And it starts out with Teresa explaining that the Wi-Fi in her studio isn't strong enough to do a good quality live stream in there. So she's in a separate room of her house. And so behind her, you see some of her dresses and nutcrackers and different toys and stuff that you see in her painting. And so some people are already asking questions briefly about those things. And she explains that since the Wi-Fi isn't strong enough in her studio, what she's done, instead of the painting part being a live stream, she's previously recorded herself painting and working on a painting. So that'll play while she is live in that room answering questions about like the painting process and all of that. And she explains what she'll be painting, which is one of her large paintings. It's a 60 by 40 inch painting that was commissioned, and it's of a mother holding a baby, and there's some dogs and a finch in it. And so when we see her working on it and painting, she's focused on painting the baby. And then Teresa explains her palette. So then the video switches, so you see in a large window still photo of her palette. And so for her palette, you get to see it and all of the colors that are on the edges of it. And she goes and explains each of the colors that's on there. And Teresa she's just so knowledgeable about all of her materials, especially the paint. So it's so interesting hearing her talk about each individual color. And then it goes into the painting demonstration. So during this, Teresa has shut off her video part, but you still hear her audio of her moderating the questions and everything. And so in the largest window, you have the video footage of Teresa painting, and then you see in a small window of Teresa with that live stream of her in that other room. And so for that window where you see her painting, it's a zoomed in detail of the painting that she's working on, which is good since the painting is 60 by 40. It's better that it's in really close so you can, see actually the brush making that and mark making that she's doing. So what you do see in that frame is you see the baby, and the baby is blocked in already. You see a bit of the mother that's holding the baby, which is also blocked in. And then around that a little bit, you can see white canvas and some compositional lines. So you kind of are seeing then the steps that she's making the painting just in that view, because you see the white canvas with compositional lines, you see the block in, and then towards the end of the video, since she's working on the baby and rendering the baby, working on the face and the clothing, that gets more towards a finished painting. So you can see all those steps from the white canvas to block into a more rendered finished area. And then of course, since she's working on it, you see her hand and her paintbrush going in and out of the frame as she's working on the painting. So during the video footage, you see she's focused in on the baby, working on the baby face and the clothing. And she talks about her painting process and also her painting process for her very large paintings, which is really interesting to hear. She describes how she's rendering the baby's face and getting things to look more 3D. She talks about her brushes a bit and the different bristles of her brushes, so like the stiffer ones or the more softer ones, and when she uses which ones to get different effects. The thing that I found was interesting was how she mixes her paints, which is pretty unique to what I do, so I got a lot out of this, where she doesn't mix her colors on her palette, but she instead uses the pure paints from the pure paints from her palette, and she mixes directly on the painting. So she explains that, and then also, if you're new to that technique, gives some tips on how to start doing that, and that was super interesting. And she also talks about how she makes her own paints too, and like with the raw pigment and adding the oil and all of that. And so how then she can customize her paints directly to how she wants them for specific areas of a painting. She talks about using different chalks in the paint as well, and how different chalks, you can get different effects. So different chalks like ground marble dust or even ground glass. She also talks about how she works with people that commission her paintings, and also how then the pandemic, how she's kind of had to adjust with the pandemic with commissions. And what was really interesting is that the person that commissioned the painting, which is the baby's grandmother, was in the live stream. So she was submitting questions and giving insights onto how they work together to get this painting. Okay, and then here are some of the questions that were asked and answered during the live stream. Not all of them, but some of them. Is how she keeps her colors in her paintings looking so pure. And when she uses flowers for her paintings, does she use live flowers, fake flowers, photo references, or a combination of all three? What mediums she uses, and if she glazes and how she glazes. How she handles edges and develops them, and how edges affect the painting and the viewer. What is her most important consideration when trying to capture a facial expression, because her facial expressions in her paintings are so unique from one another and really interesting. Who are her favorite artists? And then the end question was about integrating lifestyle with your art. And then at the end of the video, they wrapped it up and said their goodbyes. Okay, so for my review of it, like I've already said, I feel like it was definitely worth the $45. I really enjoyed getting to see Teresa paint and work. Even though the footage of her working wasn't live, like the actual painting footage was previously recorded, I thought that was kind of cool, because you could see then her natural way of painting and her natural speed. Without, if it was live and she was answering questions and talking about the process, she'd probably have to slow down more and, you know, stop and think and answer questions. So I think I actually preferred that section of it being previously recorded, and then having a little window of her that is live, that's talking about the painting process and answering questions. It's also so great to hear her talking about her painting materials and her painting practice. She is so knowledgeable about all of her materials, and you just watching her, she lights up and you can tell that she's like very excited and has put a lot of work into understanding everything that she's using. So that is definitely very infectious and inspiring. And when the webinar was finished, I was like so ready to get to my easel so I could start painting too. Another really interesting thing that I liked about this was getting to hear the person that commissioned the painting talk a little bit about the process of commissioning a painting with her, because usually, well, I guess I've only heard in the past about when painters have commissions, it's me like learning about that process from the lens of the painter. And this is the first time that I got to hear the other side of it from the lens of the commissioner, which was really interesting. Some things that I should note, one being that since they're in Antrice and Teresa are in different places, that there was a bit of a lag on Teresa's side, who Antrice is the one that's moderating the questions and everything like that. So I think there was 2 times when Antrice accidentally, because of the lag, interrupted Teresa while she was talking. And I was like, no, because I wanted to keep listening to what she had to say on that subject. And as the webinar progresses, I think the lag, which was just a tiny bit, gets a little bit longer throughout the whole thing. Also, the camera angles are fixed as well. There's one angle for the painting, which I already described, which is that zoomed in thing. So you're seeing the painting getting developed, but you do not see her like dipping her paintbrush into the different paints on her palette. But she does explain how she mixes paint, and she mixes it directly on the painting rather than her painting palette. So it didn't bother me because I felt like I wasn't missing anything, since like the important stuff is happening directly on the painting, which you do see. And all in all, like I said, I'm so glad that I spent the $45 so I can watch it. I've already watched it twice. And so if you're interested that you want to purchase it as well, just to make it easy, in the description box below, I put a link for the Savvy Painters website, which then you can find that webinar of Teresa Oaxaca with that live demonstration.